another history-making week for the state of Indiana. Governor Mike Pence on that stage in Cleveland Wednesday, officially becoming the Republican nominee for vice president. You watched it happen live right here on RTV6. Pence joking about how few people around the country know him, then immediately jumped into the role of Trump attack dog, launching into Hillary Clinton. We sat down with him after the speech about the difference between him and Donald Trump.
Donald Trump and I agree on all the important things. The need to rebuild our military and restore America's standing in the world. The need to change the status quo in Washington, D.C. and put our fiscal house in order and get this economy moving again. And the need to have a president who will appoint common sense conservatives to the Supreme Court of the United States.
We saw what happened on stage. What you didn't see, the other race happening in Cleveland, the one to replace Mike Pence as Indiana's Republican candidate for governor here. Our own Rafael Sanchez right in the middle of it.
Here inside the queue, the Indiana delegation was focused on the presidential race. But behind the scenes, 3 high-ranking Republicans are hoping to replace Governor Pence on the November ballot. I spoke to those contenders that are here in Cleveland.
My service has been focused on the state of Indiana, state government, and so solving the issues that are affecting taxpayers, property tax reform, those were the issues that I was centrally involved in, and what I want to carry on, whether it has to do with K through 12 or higher learning or biosciences, diversifying our economy, living within our means, working with the state legislature.
This committee will have a tough task.
Yeah, it's a tough task, and it's really unprecedented. This is 22 people. It is the definition of a back room, but it's one that's blessed by law. You see, we're post-primary now, so this is how the law has us take care of the situation. What I sense from every one of those members that I've talked to is the sense of seriousness that they have a fiduciary duty, really representing at least 1 million or so Republican voters from the primary, and I think they're going to do their job well. And at the end of the day, they're going to pick the best candidate, and that's the one who's known around the state, who has got great accomplishments behind him, and that's Todd Rokita.
I hope that my experience throughout my career in the private sector as well as the public sector, deputy mayor, United States attorney, working and helping lead Ivy Tech Community College, and now my work in the legislative branch in Congress. I hope to demonstrate not only to the 22 decision makers next week, but then to the voters in November, that I have the experience that it takes, that I have the track record of winning elections, and this is going to be a fast race.
Can you beat John Gregg?
I believe I can beat John Gregg. I have an incredible team behind me. We have a volunteer network that is fired up and ready to go.
I spoke to members of the committee that will have to pick the replacement, and they tell me that they're looking at a tough decision when you consider the pool: 1 state senator, a lieutenant governor, and 2 members of Congress. In Cleveland, Rafael Sanchez. Now back to you.
Thank you, Rafael, for all your work there in Cleveland. Now let's remind you that full process. The Republican State Central Committee will meet this Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. One candidate will need a majority of the 22 voting members to be nominated. The committee will hold future meetings in the next 2 weeks to name candidates for lieutenant governor and the 4th and 5th district House seats. Well, this week, it's the Democrats' turn. They're going to be in Philadelphia, the stage all set for Hillary Clinton to accept the party's presidential nomination, potentially the nation's first female president.
Please welcome.
We caught up with Congressman Andre Carson about the convention and Mike Pence now on the GOP ticket.
Governor Pence and I used to go to lunch together when we were in Congress, and I think he's a great guy personally. I've been critical of his policies, such as RFRA, women's right to choose, and other things. But at the same time, I think that there are 2 peas in the pod philosophically. Our country, in order to be great, cannot go back and want to build up walls, keep Muslims out, and discriminate. I think the DNC will be electrifying. I think it will be an exciting time. I think that you're going to hear some progressive ideas. You're going to hear from some Democrats who are moderate. And I think you're going to see a presidential team with Secretary Clinton present an agenda that works best for this country, and it speaks to the tone and the atmosphere in which we live right now.
Let's bring in the Indiana Democratic Party Chairman, John Zodi. John, thanks so much for being here. Good to see you as always. Republicans had their moment in the spotlight in Cleveland. All of the attention now shifts to Philadelphia. Are Democrats unified as we head into the convention?
I think we are. Senator Bernie Sanders endorsed Hillary Clinton a couple of weeks ago. There were a lot of discussions as we put our party platform together, and a lot of agreement reached on those issues. So I think we're going to go into Cleveland as a party that's unified.
A lot of polls have showed that trust is a big issue for Hillary Clinton going going forward. How do the speakers make the case over the next few days that that shouldn't be an issue, that Hillary Clinton can be trusted?
Well, I think people are going to talk about the not only the success and the well-being of the Democratic Party, but also about our candidates. Your party is strong when you have great candidates. Hillary Clinton is a great candidate with a long record of public service, from her time at the Children's Defense Fund all the way up through her time as Secretary of State. So I think the more people who get to know her, a lot of people know her, of course, but I think as we move through the election process over the next 120 days, people will get to know her better and understand that she will give everyone a fair shot here in the United States.
Let's talk about the governor's race back here in Indiana. Were you surprised that Donald Trump invited Governor Mike Pence to join him on the ticket, and also surprised that Governor Pence went on to do so?
Well, I think Donald Trump is unpredictable, and so what he's done by asking Governor Pence to join the ticket, he's chosen one of the most extreme leaders we've had in this state in a generation, whether it be through the RFRA mess or through signing one of the most extreme abortion laws in the country, to all kinds of things. Governor Pence's record will be now nationalized with being on the ticket with Mr. Trump. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out over the next several months.
We're all still, of course, waiting to see who the GOP puts atop the ticket going forward. Depending on who it is, how does John Gregg's campaign change from here on out?
Well, certainly the opponent will be different, but the message doesn't change. John has run an aggressive, proactive campaign for the last year or more. His fundraising has been strong. He's put out a number of policy proposals, most recently one about our state's infrastructure. He's teaming up with Glenda Ritz to talk about the importance of early childhood education. He's doing everything he needs to do to win in November. I believe he will. So his strategy doesn't change much. The candidate will be different, of course, but they will still have to answer for Mike Pence's record.
Mike Pence leaving the governor's race, a positive or a negative for John Gregg's chances?
Well, I think it now creates an open seat. There is no incumbent governor running, so I think that's a positive for John.
All right, let's look at the Senate race now. Barron Hill is out. Evan Bayh is back. Take us behind the closed doors, if you will, those conversations. What led up to that decision?
Well, this was a decision that Barron Hill made, and Senator Bayh decided that he wanted to return to the United States Senate. So both these folks, Barron Hill did a courageous thing for Indiana. I've known Barron for a number of years, used to work for him, and so I know how he operates, and he operates in a way that he knows what's best for the state, and he does what he thinks is best for the country, and that's the decision he made. Senator Bayh made his decision to get back in, and I think he is a proven leader here in Indiana, and as governor and also as a United States Senator before, so I think he's a strong candidate.
Critics might say if Evan Bayh really wanted that seat, he would have started running months ago. What do you say to them?
Well, I think this year has been anything but predictable in politics, and so whether someone gets in the race months ago or whether they get in now, we are going to just run strong campaigns. I think we all know how high the stakes are in this election. Barron Hill knows it. Evan Bayh knows it. John Gregg knows it. We're going to be talking about what Democrats are going to do for Indiana.
Great to see you again.
All right, thanks, Jason.
John,
great to be here.
I ran as an outsider. I didn't want anybody. Now I have guys like Mike Pence. I mean, this isn't supposed to happen. See, now if I don't win, I'm going to blame Mike, right? We have to blame Mike.
Doesn't look stressed, does he? Donald Trump making that statement Friday, just hours after completing what so many people thought was the impossible, including many of our insiders right here on the show, becoming the Republican nominee for president. So with that, let's welcome in our political insiders on this Sunday. Mary Beth Schneider, of course, Kip 2 for the Democrats, and our favorite conservative commentator, Abdul Hakim Shabazz. Let's go from right to left. Broad stroke, your impression of the Republican convention overall.
It was classic.
It was a long
it was classic Donald Trump. It was, today it's Ted Cruz, then it's the plagiarism allegation, and then it's the fight on the floor, and then there's Trump with the rambling speech that was just written down. But I think the highlights of the convention were Ivanka Trump, his daughter, who I thought did a really good job, and I also thought Indiana Governor Mike Pence was very Reagan-esque in his performance, in his delivery. So I would say Pence, Ivanka, the high points, Ted Cruz, and whatever that plagiarism thing was, the low points.
Kip.
It reminded me of the Bush convention with Patrick Buchanan. I think it was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster for Republicans. Every day was a bad story. I agree with him that the highlights were, I actually thought Mike Pence did a very good job in the role he was playing, and I thought Ivanka Trump was at the wrong convention.
Mary Beth? A long
It was, on the last night with the speech and that giant Trump, I mean, that's what this was. It it casts its shadow over everything Trump did, including Ivanka. Ivanka gives a lovely speech, but she's talking about things that is not in the platform nor in any policy issue that her dad has ever put out. Equal pay for women in child care support. And then Mike Pence probably gives the most normal political speech of anybody at the convention, but again, it is completely overshadowed by what's happening with Ted Cruz that night and the booing and the fact that Pence is supporting a man whose policies seem to go against so many things that Mike Pence has stood for in his career. In the end, it's all about Trump, and I don't think Ivanka and Mike Pence make a difference.
That's kind of twice in Pence's rollout. There's been this stutter step of getting him out there into the spotlight. His speech overall, though, so far, it's only been about a week and a half now on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. Has he delivered what you think Trump had wanted so far from a running mate?
I don't think we've gotten that far yet. I mean, obviously, when they start to separate and go the separate ways, and Mike goes, to go for the evangelical, the more ideological conservatives, I think that's where Pence will do his best. But when you're in the room with Donald Trump, that's kind of like being on the panel with me. The personality is just going to override it.
This is what Donald Trump wants,
It's exactly what Trump wants, but I want to say something about Pence actually was helped this week, I think, by the Ted Cruz thing. There was everybody sort of united behind the ticket because Cruz did what Cruz did, and it puts Pence in a good situation after this disaster unfolds. He will not be blamed by the general Republicans. Trump will be blamed. And
Trump disagrees.
Yeah, of course, I know. but I think for Mike Pence, I think it was a win for him because he will be in a good position to pick up the pieces and build a new Republican Party.
I'm not sure that's true, because I do think while Pence will not take a blame for a loss, I think he will be associated forever with standing there applauding things that Donald Trump says. And if this is a total disaster for Republicans in November, I think they will have to rebuild. And do you rebuild with the man who linked up with Donald Trump? I don't see how you do it.
But you got to remember, though, I mean, if we look at our history, Richard Nixon lost several times and was considered a total disaster, comes back and wins the presidency, twice. Of course, he ends up getting impeached, but it is...
Was that small matter?
That little bit part of it, too.
Little nugget of history.
I mean, Ronald Reagan ran for president twice before, he actually got the nod. So even if the SS Donald Trump were to go down in flames, I don't think necessarily Mike Pence will, have to bear too much collateral damage.
The theme on Thursday, Make America One Again. Is this Republican Party itself one going forward after this convention?
Clearly not. I mean, there can't be, I don't know who can debate that. Ted Cruz refused to endorse. The governor who brought the convention to his home state refused to go to the convention. I mean, I can go on and on and on. The Republican Party is very divided, as they should be, because Donald Trump isn't a traditional Republican. He apparently wants to get us out of NATO. I mean, there's a whole host of things that he said during the week that are not Republican dogma. So no, they're not united at all.
Before we shift gears, looking forward to the Democrats in Philadelphia. Mike Pence supporting Eric Holcomb going forward in the governor's race. Is that surprising to you?
No, that's not at all. It's a little bit unfortunate, I think, though, for Republicans. Nothing against Eric Holcomb whatsoever, but you had a really good female candidate out there. Republicans have a gender gap problem. This was an opportunity to close some of that gap. Now, again, this is nothing against Eric Holcomb, who has a lot of good qualities that I think he could bring to the governor's office, but there was a lot going for Susan Brooks in a broader sense.
I don't see how you don't endorse the guy you just picked to be your lieutenant governor. I mean, if he thought Susan Brooks was better, he should have made her the lieutenant governor. He didn't do that. He sort of has to endorse Eric Holcomb after that.
And something else to keep in mind, too, from a lot of the conversations I've had with the 22 members of the State Central Committee over the past week or so, a lot of them have been kind of going back and forth because each one, I think, is electable for different reasons. And so they weren't quite able to make a decision. A lot of them wondered, well, if the governor steps in and does some sort of formal endorsement, that's what will probably do it for me. And that's what the governor did today. And by the way, today's Friday was the filing deadline, and Tuesday they actually go in and actually do the voting.
Looking ahead now to the Democrats in Philadelphia, what do you anticipate seeing? A more unified party?
Oh, yes. And I think
a more conventional convention?
More conventional convention, and I think a more optimistic convention, because they have to paint...
That's a low bar.
...a picture. True. But they do have to paint a picture that things in America are good but can get better. And I think that's what we'll hear.
Yeah, I think they'll be more in tune with where middle America is, which is things aren't great in America. We've got a lot of challenges, but they're not the dark, holistic dystopia that Donald Trump tried to paint.
I am looking for Bernie Sanders to actually go after Donald Trump with guns ablazing, because that is going to be priceless. Yeah. That is some must-see TV.
Who gets the bigger bump from the convention?
I think Hillary Clinton gets a bigger bump because Trump's not going to get much of any bump because of what happened here. He will consolidate some Republicans, so you'll see a little bit of a bump in the polls for him in the short term. But I mean, the day after the convention, he already did 3 controversial things that disenfranchised cruise folks and other things. So I think Hillary will get a better bump.
I think Hillary too, but I don't believe in convention bumps. I don't think they last.
Actually, I think the biggest bump will be Gary Johnson, because after folks see Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump,
always Abdul with Gary Johnson. See what happens. Abdul, Kip, Mary Beth, thank you so much. We turn back now to the U.S. race for Senate. Indiana Democrats Friday night formally nominating Evan Bayh to replace Barron Hill on the November ballot. It's a huge shakeup in a race that most analysts thought would be an easy Republican win. Our Katie Hines is with GOP candidate Todd Young.
How does Evan Bayh's entrance into this race change your strategy, if at all?
I'll continue to focus on advancing real solutions to ensure that every Hoosier has access to a quality education that turns into a good-paying job and ultimately leads to a meaningful career right here in Indiana. I'll be making the argument, of course, that the system is in fact rigged, just as we're hearing from so many Hoosiers. A big part of the problem is the fact that we have so many elected representatives who go to Washington and then forget about Indiana. I live in Indiana. I've been able to actually advance solutions to improve lives. Evan Bayh is a Washington lobbyist who's forgotten over the course of the years about Indiana. In fact, one could argue he is Washington. One classic example would be his Obamacare vote. He voted for Obamacare despite the pleadings of so many Hoosiers asking that he not cast that deciding vote. And then just months after leaving the United States Senate, failing to account for that vote, he didn't hesitate to lobby on behalf of companies that had problems with the very legislation he helped create. You won't see that sort of leadership from Todd Young.
How do you respond to some national analyses pegging this now as a race that's tilting Democrat, also one democratically commissioned poll that puts you 21 points behind?
Yeah, so this race is a toss-up by most estimates. I think that's fair. I think we have a lot of work to do in the coming months. Senator Bayh has a lot of work to do, of course, explaining his vote for Obamacare, explaining why he voted for the stimulus package, which failed and ushered in an era of reckless spending, explaining why he left the United States Senate on account of the lack of bipartisanship, and now things have only gotten worse, and he thinks somehow he can make a change, and explaining why for roughly 2 decades he hasn't lived in Indiana, spent very little time in Indiana. He has 2 mansions in Washington, D.C. He is best equipped during this period of time to bring change to Washington.
What's at stake for Indiana?
Everything's at stake for Indiana. I have 4 young children. I'm running to give them a better future. Of course, all of us are concerned about safety and security. I'm a U.S. Marine. I believe that during this time of war, I'm uniquely equipped to help keep us safe and secure. I'm running for every Hoosier, people like my parents who don't happen to come from a political family, as Senator Bayh does. And, these things, it's essential we get these elections right. And so I'm going to work very hard between now and November to earn the trust and support of every Hoosier.
What's at stake if the GOP does not maintain control of the Senate?
The Senate will be a firewall against a Hillary Clinton presidency and 4 more years against Barack Obama's policies, or even worse, if Hillary Clinton were to win the presidency. Or more positively, the Senate can be a real opportunity to get things done in a bipartisan way that can help grow more jobs, increase personal incomes, and improve the lives of all Hoosiers. And that's my objective.
We saw particularly, as some would say, hostile primary campaign. Now I know your campaign has also taken on a negative tone almost immediately after Bayh got into this race. Is this the strategy moving forward? Will we see a shift in that tone?
I've heard feedback already from so many Hoosiers that they think character should be an issue. They think one's presence in the state over the course of decades should be an issue. They think one's attachment to Hoosiers and their values should be an issue. The last thing we need right now is more people in Washington who carry Washington values, who are of Washington. The last thing we need are people who've spent years and years in elective office with very little to show for it. I've spent just 6 years, 1 Senate term roughly, in the United States House. I have a record of accomplishment, and I'll bring that to the Senate on behalf of Hoosiers and never, ever lose touch with the people I represent.
Thanks to Katie Hines there. You can find all of our Indianapolis This Week interviews right now on our new Indianapolis This Week Facebook page. We also want you to follow along. Join us on Twitter. Join the debate every day. We'll be